He was a lonely Apache who hadn't seen his sister in years. When he heard a bride was being sold for just $2, he couldn't resist. But the woman he brought home wasn't just any stranger. She was the sister, he thought, he'd lost forever. Before starting the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. The sun hung low over the jagged mesas, casting long golden shadows across the desert floor. In the quiet of the evening, the wind carried whispers through the scrub and sagebrush, and the lonely figure of an Apache man moved slowly along a dusty path. His name was Dakota, and though he had learned to navigate the unforgiving land with ease, his steps carried a weight far heavier than the pack on his back. Dakota's heart ached with a longing that no amount of wandering could soothe. He had been alone for many years. As a boy, he had known the warmth and laughter of family life, the chatter of siblings, the guidance of elders, the quiet presence of a sister whose laughter had been like a song in the canyon. But that life had been torn from him violently, in a raid that had scattered his people and left him stranded in a world that suddenly felt too vast and cold. Since that day, Dakota had wandered from village to village, never staying long enough to call any place home. The mountains and rivers had been his companions, but they could not replace the human connections he craved. In the evenings, by the light of a small fire, Dakota would trace the contours of his sister's face in his mind. He remembered the way she had tucked her dark hair behind her ear when she was shy, the soft smile she gave when he told her a story, and the tiny birthmark on her left wrist that had always fascinated him. He carried these memories like fragile treasures, fearing that, if he forgot them, he might lose her entirely to the cruel distance of time. The Apache community he had left behind had accepted his absence, some with pity, others with indifference. Dakota knew he had changed in ways they could not understand. His silence, his cautious movements, his wariness of strangers, they were the marks of survival, the scars of someone who had witnessed too much yet spoken too little. And yet, beneath that rugged exterior, a part of him remained tender, a part that clung to the hope of reunion, of rediscovering what had been lost. That hope, faint as it was, gave him purpose. Each day he hunted, each night he rested, each morning he rose with the sun. It all had meaning because he believed, however dimly, that one day he might find her. In his dreams she appeared, sometimes close, sometimes just beyond his reach, a spectral reminder of the bond that no raid, no distance could sever. Dakota's solitude was compounded by the changes sweeping through the land. The Apache were scattered, many adapting to new ways imposed by outsiders, while others clung fiercely to the old traditions. He often found himself at odds with both, belonging nowhere completely. In the small settlements he occasionally visited, he was met with wary eyes and half-whispered judgments. Outsiders could sense the quiet intensity in him, the loneliness etched into the lines of his face, and they kept their distance. For Dakota, the isolation was not just a matter of geography, it was woven into the very fabric of his existence. Yet even in his solitude, Dakota was not without purpose. He took pride in his knowledge of the land, the hidden springs where water ran clear, the best trails to follow through the mesas, the plants that could heal or harm. These skills, passed down from elders and honed through experience, were his armor against the harshness of the world. But no skill could fill the void left by his sister's absence. No mastery of survival could replace the laughter, the companionship, the bond he had lost. On this particular evening, as the wind rustled through the cacti and the sky burned pink and orange, Dakota paused at the crest of a small hill. Below him lay the village where he had spent some of his childhood, now distant and quiet, like a memory fading into dusk. He knelt and touched the earth, feeling the familiar grit between his fingers. In the silence, he whispered her name, a name he had not spoken aloud in years. but one that still held power over his heart. Dakota was a man shaped by loss, but also by hope. The loneliness that had followed him for years was not only a curse. It was a compass, guiding him towards something he could not yet see, but instinctively knew was out there. Somewhere beyond the mesas, beyond the rivers, beyond the settlements he passed in silence, was a chance for reunion. And though the road ahead was uncertain, he would not stop walking it. Weeks had passed since Dakota had paused at the hilltop, whispering his sister's name to the desert wind. He continued his wanderings, moving from canyon to canyon, river to river, always scanning the horizon for signs, anything that might hint at her presence. It was during one of these journeys that he arrived at a small settlement, a cluster of wooden buildings sun-bleached and worn by the relentless heat. Smoke rose from chimneys, carrying the scent of cooking meat and wood fire. But beneath the surface, the settlement thrummed with whispers and curiosity. Dakota had no intention of staying long. Yet, as he passed a gathering of villagers near the market square, a voice reached him, a voice carrying a mixture of astonishment and amusement. "Did you hear?" A woman said to another, her eyes darting toward him. "There's a bride being sold for $2. $2. Can you imagine?" The words froze Dakota mid-step. He had heard of brides being arranged, of dowries and trades, but this price was absurd, almost impossible. Who would sell a woman for so little? And yet, instinct prickled at him a strange pull, a feeling that this news was not meant for idle ears. He lingered at the edge of the crowd, listening as rumors tumbled forth. Some claimed she was wild, unfit for marriage. Others whispered she had fled her home, a runaway who had no kin left to claim her. A few villagers shrugged and laughed, declaring that for such a price, she could not possibly be worth much. But Dakota felt none of the derision or judgment. In the strange pull of his heart, he sensed an opportunity, however faint. Something told him that this was no ordinary woman, no ordinary transaction. He did not know why, but a memory, half forgotten and urgent, stirred in his chest a fragment of his past that seemed to cry. Out from the shadows of the present, he approached the speaker cautiously. "Where is this woman?" he asked, his voice steady but carrying an edge of intensity that made the villagers pause. Murmurs rippled through the group, and one of the elders, a wiry man with weathered skin and sharp eyes, pointed toward a wooden building at the edge of town. "She's waiting there," he said. "But I warn you, stranger, there's more to her story than the price suggests." Dakota nodded, but he felt a surge of determination. More than curiosity, more than chance, this felt like fate. The price, the rumors, even the warnings, they all converged into a singular possibility that he could not ignore. He would see her, speak to her, and if the spirits allowed it, bring her home. As he made his way through the dusty streets, he felt the villagers' eyes on him. Some watched with suspicion, others with open curiosity, as though they sensed that Dakota was a man shaped by storms, both external and internal. They whispered about the lone Apache, a wanderer with a solemn gaze, and some speculated whether he was worthy of such a strange and inexpensive bride. But Dakota did not care. He had a purpose, and no outsider opinion could sway him. Reaching the building, he paused at the doorway. Inside, a young woman sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. Her eyes lifted slowly to meet his, and for a moment, the world outside the door ceased to exist. There was something in her gaze, a flicker of familiarity, a spark that tugged at the edges of memory. She looked wary, yet not unkind, and Dakota felt an inexplicable recognition. The transaction itself was almost perfunctory. Two coins exchanged hands, hands rough and calloused meeting briefly, a silent acknowledgement of an agreement that seemed both absurd and inevitable. But Dakota's mind was elsewhere. Every detail, the tilt of her head, the way she held herself, The cadence of her voice stirred a memory long buried, a sense of a connection that defied explanation. As they left the settlement together, Dakota kept his eyes on her, searching for more clues, more signs. The desert stretched endlessly before them, unforgiving and vast, yet for the first time in years, he felt a strange, fragile hope. The journey ahead was unknown, filled with questions and perhaps danger, but he was no longer merely wandering. He had a reason, a spark, a thread that might lead him to something greater than solitude, and deep inside, though he did not yet know it fully, Dakota felt that the woman by his side might hold the answers he had been seeking for years, the key to a past lost and a future yet to be reclaimed. Dakota walked beside her through the dusty plains, the setting sun painting the horizon in streaks of gold and crimson. Each step kicked up small clouds of dust that clung to his boots, but he hardly noticed. His mind was a storm of anticipation and unease. Who was this woman, really? Why had fate or perhaps fortune led him to her at this precise moment when his heart had been aching for years? She walked silently beside him, her eyes fixed on the ground. The movement of her hands, the subtle tilt of her head, even the rhythm of her footsteps all stirred something in Dakota's memory. He squinted at her features in the fading light. Her hair, dark and thick, fell loosely around her shoulders. Her eyes were deep, almost haunting in their intensity. There was a grace about her, quiet but unyielding, cautious yet curious, that he could not place but somehow knew. Finally, he broke the silence. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice calm but deliberate, carrying the weight of a question far deeper than mere introduction. "Naya," she replied softly. Her voice was like a whisper of wind through the canyon, familiar, yet distant. Dakota felt his heart tighten at the sound. Something about that name, or the way she spoke it, resonated with a fragment of memory long buried. He shook the thought off. Perhaps it was merely coincidence. "You have been through much, haven't you?" he asked, trying not to reveal too much of the ache in his voice. Naya glanced at him, her eyes narrowing slightly, wary yet receptive. "I have seen hardship," she said, "but I have endured. And you? You seem different from others." Dakota's gaze softened. "I am not like most," he admitted. "I understand loss. I understand separation." The words lingered in the air, unspoken yet heavy with meaning. He did not yet know why, but he felt a connection growing, fragile and inexplicable, like a thread stretching taut between them. As they reached a small clearing where the night would soon drape its velvet shadow, Dakota studied her more closely. The way she moved, the quiet determination in her posture, the fleeting expressions that crossed her face, it was as if he were glimpsing a reflection of a life he had once known, a life that had been ripped from him too soon. "Sit," he said gently, pointing to a flat rock near a small campfire he had prepared earlier. The fire's flickering light illuminated her face, and for a fleeting moment, Dakota caught a glimpse of something unmistakable: the curve of her smile, the soft line of her jaw, the tiny birthmark on her left wrist. His breath caught in his throat. Could it be? Could she really? Naya noticed the sudden intensity in his eyes and tilted her head, puzzled. "What is it?" she asked, concern threading her voice. "Nothing," he said quickly, forcing a calm he did not feel. But inside, his heart raced with a hope he had not dared to feel in years. Every instinct, every memory, every lingering ache of the past seemed to converge at this moment. They sat by the fire in silence, the world around them fading into the background. The desert night was alive with the sounds of wind and distant creatures, yet their attention remained on one another. Dakota wanted to ask her 100 questions, to probe the depths of her past, to confirm the gnawing suspicion that she was the sister he had lost. But he restrained himself. The risk of startling her, of losing this fragile connection, was too great. Instead, He studied her, memorizing the nuances of her expressions, the way her eyes reflected the firelight, the slight tremor in her hands when she adjusted her shawl. Each detail, each subtle sign, etched itself into his mind. He had found her, perhaps by fate, perhaps by fortune, but he could not yet allow himself to believe fully as the stars began to pierce the velvet sky. Dakota felt a quiet certainty growing within him. She was not just any stranger bought for $2. She was someone from his past, someone whose presence carried the weight of memory, hope, and loss. He did not yet know the whole truth, but the first threads of recognition had been pulled taut, and the tapestry of their shared history was beginning to reveal itself. And in that still, sacred moment, amidst the desert and the flickering firelight, Dakota realized that this meeting was only the beginning. Whatever lay ahead, questions, revelations, perhaps even heartbreak, they were bound together now, drawn inexorably by a bond that time and distance could not sever. As the fire crackled, and the desert night stretched endlessly around them, Dakota's mind began to drift, slipping through the fragile thread of time back to a day he had tried and failed to forget. The memory came unbidden, vivid and raw, a tapestry of light and shadow that had haunted him for years. He was a boy again, no more than 10 winters old, running barefoot across the rocky terrain near the village. His sister Lu Yu laughed behind him, her laughter carrying over the wind like a melody he had once known by heart. Her dark hair flew behind her, tangled with the dust and leaves of the canyon, and her small hand reached for his as they ran together. They were inseparable then, bound by a sibling bond that was both tender and fierce. Their father had called them for supper, his voice echoing through the canyon walls. They had stopped, breathless and exhilarated, and sat by the fire with the rest of the family. Lu Yu had leaned close to him, whispering a secret joke, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Dakota had smiled, feeling the warmth of her presence, the safety of a home where laughter could flourish and where love was absolute. Then the raid came. It was sudden, violent, and unrelenting. Smoke curled into the sky, and screams pierced the stillness of the evening. Dakota's parents had shouted instructions, grabbed weapons, tried to protect the children, but chaos overwhelmed them. In the confusion, Dakota had been thrown aside, his small body shielded by instinct and luck. He had seen his village burned, his people scattered, and in the midst of the terror, he had lost Lu Yu. He remembered the moment most sharply, a fleeting glance, a flash of her hair, a small hand reaching for his, and then nothing. The world had swallowed her in an instant, and he had been left clutching empty air. For years afterward, he wandered, driven by a single, unrelenting thought. She might still be alive, somewhere. Somehow the desert, which had been his companion and protector, became also a prison of memory. Every canyon bend, every riverbed, every whisper of wind through the mesquite reminded him of what he had lost. Nights were the worst when the quiet pressed against him, and he would whisper her name to the stars, hoping they would carry his plea across the land. Even as he grew into manhood, the pain did not dull. It was a shadow that followed him relentlessly, shaping his decisions, his solitude, and his view of the world. He had learned to survive, to read the land, to move with stealth and caution, but the ache of her absence never left him. It was a ghost he carried, a constant companion in the quiet moments between one day's survival and the next. And yet, in this memory, there was also a spark of hope. He remembered her eyes, bright and fierce, full of curiosity and mischief. That memory had fueled his belief, a small ember he had kept alive, that somehow, against all odds, they would be reunited. As the memory receded, Dakota's gaze fell upon Naya sitting across the fire. The flickering flames danced in her eyes, illuminating features that seemed to mirror those of his lost sister. The curve of her smile, the tilt of her head, The quiet grace in her movements, it all triggered a storm of recognition, a mixture of hope and fear. Could it really be her? Or was this just another cruel twist of fate, teasing him with what might have been? He looked away, blinking back the sudden rush of emotion. It was too soon to be certain, too soon to speak. But the memory had given him direction. Every instinct, every fragment of recollection, every heartbeat whispered the same thing. The woman before him was more than a stranger. She might be the sister he had searched for all his life, the one he thought lost forever. Dakota exhaled slowly, the night air cool against his skin. He could not yet claim certainty, but the past and present had collided in a way that left him both terrified and exhilarated. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing. The journey to uncover the truth and to reclaim what had been stolen from him had only just begun. The days that followed were filled with uneasy companionship. Dakota and Naya traveled together across the rugged landscape, moving cautiously through canyons, riverbeds, and sparse forests. At first, their conversations were minimal. The silence between them weighted but not uncomfortable. Dakota observed her quietly, studying the way she walked, the way she handled her small belongings, the way she occasionally glanced at him with a mixture of curiosity and caution. It was during one of these moments, while Naya adjusted a bundle of firewood on her shoulder, that Dakota noticed a small crescent-shaped birthmark on her left wrist. His heart skipped a beat. He had remembered that mark from his childhood, when his sister had proudly shown it off to him, calling it her star of luck. Could it really be? He forced himself to stay calm, to treat it as coincidence until he had more evidence. As the days passed, more subtle signs began to appear. Naya had a habit of humming softly while working, a tune that Dakota recognized from their childhood, though he couldn't name it. She had an uncanny familiarity with the land, noticing plants and water sources as if she had known them long before meeting him. And there were phrases she used, words and expressions, that triggered memories buried deep within him, fragments of conversation they had once shared as children. Dakota's mind became a careful investigator, piecing together the clues with a mix of hope and fear. He asked her gently about her past, about the family she remembered, framing questions in a casual way so as not to alarm her. "Where did you grow up?" he asked one evening as they rested by a stream. "I don't remember much before I was very young," Naya replied, her voice hesitant. "My earliest memories are scattered. I was with people who were not my family. I remember kindness, sometimes fear, and someone I used to play with." She paused, eyes distant. "A boy, maybe. I don't know." Dakota's pulse quickened. The fragmented recollection matched his own memories, though the details were incomplete. He could feel the threads of the past tugging at him, intertwining with the present in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. Over the next few days, he continued his subtle investigations. He watched for reactions, tested her memory gently, and compared everything she said to the fragments he remembered. One evening, as they prepared their camp, he noticed her reach for a small pouch hanging from her belt. Inside was a trinket, a carved piece of wood, worn and faded. It was something he had given his sister long ago, a keepsake he had thought lost forever. "Where did you get this?" he asked quietly, his voice barely above the crackle of the fire. Naya looked at it, then at him, confusion clouding her face. I don't know. It's been with me for as long as I can remember," she said, touching the trinket gently. The truth began to press against him, heavy and undeniable. All the small signs, the habits, the marks, the memory fragments, they converged toward one conclusion he had dared not fully hope for until now. But still, he held back, wary of frightening her or forcing a truth she was not ready to face. At night, Dakota lay under the stars, the desert wide and silent above him. He replayed every moment, every clue, every spark of recognition. He knew the risk. If he moved too quickly, if he spoke too soon, he could shatter the fragile connection, losing her again. And yet, the hope he had carried for years surged forward with undeniable force. By the time dawn broke, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks, Dakota had made a decision. He would continue to observe, to question subtly, and to wait for the right moment. The signs were too numerous, too precise, to ignore. His sister, his lost Lu Yu, was out there, in the woman who walked beside him. And he would uncover the truth, gently, carefully, until there was no doubt left. Every glance, every shared moment, every small habit and memory now carried a deeper significance. The journey that had begun with curiosity and faith had shifted into something far more urgent and sacred. The search for a sister who had been lost, yet never forgotten, and the delicate task of bringing the past and present together without shattering the fragile thread that remained. The fire crackled low, casting shadows that danced across the canyon walls. Dakota sat across from Naya, the silence between them heavy but charged with something neither fully understood. He had watched her for days, piecing together the fragments of memory, the subtle clues that refused to be ignored. Every instinct screamed the truth, yet the fear of being wrong, of shattering the fragile trust he had built, kept him silent until now. Naya leaned forward, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of curiosity and cautious hope. "You've been watching me," she said softly, a tinge of amusement in her voice. "And thinking. Something is troubling you, Dakota. You've not been yourself these past days." He inhaled slowly, the night air heavy with the scent of sage and firewood. "Naya," he began, his voice trembling just enough to betray the depth of his emotion. "There is something I need to ask. Something I must know." Her gaze sharpened, uncertainty flickering across her face. "Ask, then," she replied. Dakota held up the small wooden trinket she had carried, the one he had recognized immediately. "This, do you know its meaning? Where it came from?" Nia's eyes widened as she took the trinket, turning it over in her hands. A flicker of memory passed across her features, an echo of something long forgotten. I don't remember clearly. Only that it was given to me when I was very young. I thought it was a keepsake, but I never knew from whom." Dakota's heart pounded. He leaned closer, his voice barely more than a whisper. "I gave that to my sister. To Lu Yu. She was my sister." Naya's eyes widened, shock and disbelief mingling with the first glimmer of recognition. She stared at him, searching his face for any hint of jest or deceit, but found none. "Your sister?" she echoed, voice trembling. "Yes," he said, his hands gripping the trinket as if it could anchor him to this moment. "You are Lu Yu. You survived the raid? You were lost, but you are here." Tears welled in her eyes as memories, long buried and fragmented, began to surface. The laughter of a brother, the games they had played in the canyon, the small, secret joys of childhood, they all rushed back at once, overwhelming and undeniable. "Dakota, it's me," she whispered, her voice breaking. I thought I was alone. I thought I would never see you again." Dakota felt a surge of relief and anguish all at once. He reached out, taking her hands in his, feeling the familiar warmth and strength he had remembered. "I searched for you every day," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Even when I thought I would never find you, even when I feared you were gone, I never gave up." They embraced, a long, trembling hug that spoke of years of separation, of longing, and of love that had never diminished. The desert around them seemed to sigh in quiet approval, the wind carrying away the years of sorrow and fear, leaving only the profound sense of reunion. For a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. All that remained were the brother and sister, bound by blood and memory, reunited against the odds. The mistakes, the misunderstandings, the strange and sudden purchase that had brought them together, it all faded in the glow of recognition. In the knowledge that they had found each other again, Naya pulled back slightly, resting her forehead against Dakota's chest. How did you know?" she asked, her voice small, awed. "I felt it," he replied simply. "In your eyes, in your hands, in the way you move. I recognized you. And when I saw the trinket, when you spoke of fragments of memory, I knew. It had to be you." Tears streaked down both their faces, mixing with laughter and sobs. The years of fear, of searching, of longing, all converged in this single, miraculous moment. They had found each other, not through luck alone, but through hope, intuition, and the unbreakable bond of family. As the night deepened, Dakota and Naya sat side by the fire, hands still entwined, hearts still racing. Words were unnecessary. The reunion itself said everything. In that quiet, sacred moment, they both understood that no matter the hardships, no matter the years apart, love and family endured, and the past, with all its pain and longing, had finally led them home. Word of the revelation spread faster than the desert wind. Villagers whispered in the shadows, some in awe, some in disbelief, and a few in judgment. A young woman purchased for $2 only to be revealed as the long-lost sister of a wandering Apache man was a story that strained credulity. By dawn, the settlement buzzed with murmurs, and Dakota and Naya felt eyes following them wherever they went. Dakota knew that while their reunion had been miraculous, it would not be free from complications. The transaction, though brief and legal, was scandalous in the eyes of the villagers. Some saw the purchase as a dishonor, a blemish on Naya's dignity. Others questioned Dakota's intentions, casting shadows of suspicion over his otherwise noble character. Naya, for her part, remained strong but wary. She had survived much in her life, and now she faced a new challenge, reclaiming her autonomy and her place in the world after being treated as property. Her calm and quiet strength contrasted with the gossiping crowd, and Dakota admired her resilience more than ever. The siblings knew they had to act carefully. Dakota approached the village elder, a stern man with years etched into his face. "She is not a bride to be owned," Dakota said firmly. "She is my sister, Luyu. The transaction that brought her here was done under misunderstanding, and it must be undone in truth and honor." The elder studied them both in silence, weighing the situation. Finally, he nodded. "The spirits have indeed intervened," he said gravely. "It is rare that fate returns what was lost. You speak with truth and honor, Dakota. The mistake must be corrected, and the girl's freedom restored." Word spread that the 2 coins were merely symbolic, and the purchase would be annulled, restoring Naya's autonomy. Villagers whispered their approval reluctantly, but the siblings refused to let the gossip overshadow what mattered most: their reunion. With their freedom restored, Dakota and Naya faced another challenge, deciding where to go next. The desert was vast, and while Dakota had wandered for years, Naya had been shaped by survival and independence. Together, they charted a path home, back to the remnants of their village, where memories of family and childhood still lingered in the cliffs and streams. During the journey, they shared stories of their years apart. Dakota spoke of his search, of nights under starlit skies, whispering her name to the wind. Naya shared fragments of her life in distant lands, surviving strangers, learning to adapt, yet never feeling truly whole. Each story deepened their bond, healing the wounds left by separation and fear. As they returned to familiar cliffs and riverbeds, they were met with cautious curiosity from the remaining villagers. But the siblings walked together with quiet dignity, a testament to resilience and love. Dakota introduced Naya not as a bride, but as his sister lost, found, and restored. Slowly, the villagers' whispers turned to acceptance, and some even offered gestures of respect for the perseverance of family ties. In the evenings, under the stars that had once guided Dakota alone, the siblings sat by the fire, their hands intertwined. Laughter returned, tentative at first, then freely, carrying across the canyon like a song reborn. They shared memories, built new ones, and allowed themselves to feel the fullness of life again. Through the ordeal, both Dakota and Naya realized that family, once thought lost, could not be erased by circumstance, fear, or misunderstanding. The transaction that had seemed so trivial, the $2 purchase, had become the unlikely bridge that restored what time and violence had taken. In the end, love, hope, and courage triumphed, and the siblings embraced a future together, stronger and wiser for the trials they had faced. The desert sun rose slowly, painting the cliffs and canyons in warm golds and soft purples, as if blessing the reunion of two souls long separated. Dakota and Naya walked side by side, no longer just a lone wanderer and a woman whose life had been uprooted, but siblings united by a bond neither time nor misfortune could sever. Back in their village, the familiar sights, stone pathways, riverbeds where they had once played, and the remnants of their childhood home welcomed them gently. The elders watched in quiet approval, and the remaining villagers, initially skeptical, began to see the truth in their story. This was not a tale of shame or scandal, but of resilience, love, and the unbreakable ties of family. Dakota and Naya spent the days rebuilding their connection piece by piece. They shared meals, told stories of their separate journeys, and laughed at small, private memories that only the two of them understood. Each conversation, each shared glance, strengthened their bond and healed the invisible scars left by years of separation. Naya began to reclaim her sense of self. No longer defined by the strange and unfortunate circumstances of the $2 transaction, she found joy in her own strength, her survival, and the knowledge that she had finally returned to where she belonged. Dakota, who had carried the weight of loss for so long, felt the emptiness in his heart begin to fade, replaced by a profound sense of wholeness he had never thought possible. Together, they tended the land around their village, reconnecting with the natural rhythms that had shaped their childhood. They fished in the streams, gathered herbs and roots, and shared quiet evenings by the fire, feeling the presence of ancestors and the continuity of life in every flickering flame. The desert, once a vast emptiness that had mirrored Dakota's loneliness, now seemed vibrant and welcoming, alive with memory, connection, and hope. The siblings also began to help others in the community. They offered guidance to children, shared knowledge of the land and its hidden secrets, and spoke of resilience, courage, and the power of family bonds. In doing so, they not only healed themselves but also strengthened the community, reminding everyone that even in the harshest conditions, life, love, and connection could endure. As seasons changed, Dakota and Naya walked the mesas and canyons together, sometimes in silence, sometimes in laughter. Their bond deepened into something profound, a quiet understanding that no matter what trials came, they would face them side by side. The scars of the past remained, but they were no longer burdens. They were markers of survival, proof of love, and reminders of the miraculous reunion that had brought them back to each other. One evening, as the stars began to pierce the deep blue sky, Naya leaned against Dakota, her head resting on his shoulder. "I thought I would never see you again," she whispered, her voice soft against the desert wind. "And yet, here we are," Dakota replied, wrapping his arm around her. "Lost, found, and together again. Nothing can take this away from us." In that moment, the desert seemed to hold its breath, a quiet witness to their journey, their healing, and their reunion. The past, with all its pain, had led them to this present of hope and love. The siblings had been tested by time, separation, and circumstance, but they had emerged whole together, And stronger than ever, as the fire flickered and the night deepened, Dakota and Naya sat in peaceful silence, the stars above reflecting the enduring truth they now carried. Family, love, and hope could survive even the cruelest of losses. They had found each other again, and in that, the desert itself seemed to smile.